in bonds. Literally, sometimes Paul was an ambassador in bonds. Other times he was just, I am constrained to serve Christ because this is what He's called me to do. I don't dare do something else with my life. I don't dare just watch football on Sundays. I don't dare go back to all those things in my past because I know that Christ has called me to the higher road. I am in bonds. Sometimes it's a good thing to be in bonds. It keeps you away from a lot of things too. And he also has called us just to live as though we carry the name of Christ with us. 2 Timothy 2:19, let everyone that nameth the name of Christ depart from iniquity. If you carry the name of Christ as a banner, we were singing that song this afternoon, Onward Christian Soldiers. Christ is our banner that goes before us. You know, we don't necessarily think of it in the same way, but really the United States flag is our banner today. Carries the colors of our nation. Back in this time, they got banners that they would carry with them into battle. That was somebody's entire job. Carry the flag. Carry the banner. Let people know that we are representatives. We are the army of whoever. And they were proud to let that banner fly high. Those colors meant something. Now, when we carry the name of Christ, do we put it on a pedestal for all to see? And if we do, then depart from iniquity. Don't shame His name. Or, because we don't want to depart from iniquity, do we kind of hide the banner? You know, even during the tribulation period, there's two different places that people will be able to get the mark, either on their forehead to proudly proclaim that they follow Him, or on their hand. How do we proclaim Christ? I hope He's a banner, way above our heads, departing from iniquity. So Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God, and Timotheus, our brother, and then you can see here that he wrote it to Colossae, this church here. To whom? I did it wrong that time, didn't I?
To whom?
You got it.
They changed the grammar, so don't worry about it.
Well, I'm trying to teach grammatically. But Colossae is here in this area. There's also two other of these cities. You'll see right above it to the north, Laodicea. Very well known in the book of Revelation. And then the city to the northeast of that is Hierapolis. Both these cities are mentioned in Colossians chapter 4. It's interesting to me to note, though, that most biblical scholars say that Paul wrote this. It was one of his prison epistles written from Rome near the end of his life, which is why they assume somewhere between 61 to 63 AD. But in 17 AD, Hierapolis actually had a huge earthquake that destroyed about half the city. And then in 60 AD, Hierapolis had an even larger earthquake that actually crumbled 90 to 95% of the city, depending on which historian you read. The whole city was practically gone, which actually Hierapolis, of the three cities, was one of the larger cities. Colossae, it's interesting to note that Colossae was actually the smallest of the three, yet it's the only city that we have a letter that's been canonized. Another one of those things, sometimes we just can't understand, we can't wrap our minds around exactly why God, in His infinite knowledge, would pick the smallest city, with most likely the smallest church, to write a letter to that would then be preserved forever. You would think in a human mindset, well, what about the epistle to the Laodiceans that Paul writes about in verse 16 of chapter 4? When this epistle is read among you, cause it to be read also in the church of the Laodiceans, and that you likewise read the epistle from Laodicea. Assuming there was a church in Hierapolis, I would only assume then that because Hierapolis is mentioned in the very previous verse, that Paul most likely wrote a letter to them too. Where's that one? Answer? Who cares? It doesn't matter. God gave us everything that we need right here. And these questions always come up. But some of these lost letters, God lost them for a reason. But to Colossians, their city was actually very beautiful. Looking at the ruins, the top left picture is actually the hot springs of Hierapolis. Not really used much medicinally in the 1st century, but especially as you go into the 2nd century, really into the 3rd century, as the Roman nation really was expanding in their heyday. In the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Hierapolis became a very big area that people would come to, rest in the hot springs. It was very medicinal. Then the picture on the right is actually one of the temples in Laodicea. You can just see the opulence that these people put into their temples. You can, anywhere in the Asia Minor area, into Greece, you will see, I can't even think how many thousands or millions of dollars in modern day money was invested in these false gods. And then the bottom left picture is actually a tower that's in a city that was called Denzini, a little bit again to the southwest of Colossae, because if you try to find pictures of Colossae itself, there aren't many. Because the Colossian city actually, for the most part, has been completely destroyed. It's not a big tourist spot nowadays. But these 3 cities, all on each end of this river here that goes through them, that's what really brought all these cities together. There's only a few miles in between each city, so the 3 of them were a huge sort of, I guess you can say like tri-city commerce. The 3 of them worked together in order to have an economy that was very stable and very lucrative, because they were all right along this river that it was easy to transport goods. And the other thing that's to note is, I'll get to that in a second. This is actually the main goddess of the city of Colossae, known as Cybele. You can see lots and lots of statues. There's a huge fountain. This is actually preserved in one of the museums. And the other statue up on the left is preserved in one of the other museums in Greece, I think. And she was known as the Earth Mother. Very, very known for her fertility. Gave the ground its fertility. Now the problem was that, again, you could see the perversion that goes into these things. The females, known as the priestesses, would conduct orgies on a normal basis, if not more than a daily basis. The males would systematically and ritualistically castrate themselves in order to prove their allegiance to this woman only. I care for no one else but you. And then these men would go down. There's actually caves on the outside of the Colossae city. They would go down inside of these. They were full of a carbon dioxide. It was very pungent smell. And because oxygen is heavier than carbon dioxide, they would go into these caves beyond where people could see, dug way down to the ground, be able to breathe the air along the ground, and stay in there for hours at a time, and then emerge, still alive. So now people would then look at them and say, look, they've been preserved by the great goddess. They must now be some supreme, superior being. This miracle has happened. Let's now worship these people. And then those priests and priestesses would gain a godlike status amongst many of the people of that city. And that's why you're going to see how Paul is going to defend the deity of Christ over and over and over again in the book of Colossians here. Because what he is fighting against is these people that believe that you can practically be a God in human form. And that's why he makes one of the biggest defenses for Jesus Christ's deity in a man as the God-man, because he is battling against that these people that are men also can be God. And that's why I say it just makes the Bible come alive when you see the historical context of why Paul is battling this. But then there were some other, if you look into the city of Hierapolis, they had a temple to Apollo, one of the greatest Greek gods. Also the Nymphaeum, if I said that, Nymphaeum, however you say it. They worship nymphs, and that Nymphaeum is that same place that I was talking about. They had this also in Hierapolis, where the people would go down underneath the city, emerge as gods. And also the necropolis was a place where they would worship the god Plutonium, who was the god of the underworld. Meaning that they would even try to practice things such as raising the dead, calling people back from the underworld, killing people, human sacrifice. all sorts of things happening right on the outskirts of these cities, and sometimes even right within the cities, depending on where the temple was placed. And then if you look at Laodicea, they had this, it was originally called Diospolis, which was the city of Zeus. Zeus being one of the most well-known Greek gods. And then it's interesting to note that the water from Hierapolis, from those hot springs, would flow south, would meet with the Colossian River, which was coming up, actually flowing to the north. That's where that intersection happened. Do I have the map here? No. And right there is where you find the city of Laodicea. So you have hot water and cold water merging together to make that lukewarm water, which is again another way that I think the Bible is just using a play on words even for their city. Why can't you be hot like Hierapolis? Why can't you be cold like Colossus? You're kind of right in the middle. You can't decide what you want to be. You're just lukewarm. You're really not good for anything. You're not medicinal because you're not warm. You're not refreshing because you're not cold. People just want to spit you out. And really this takes us into the part again about why it was written. As we look at verse 3, it says, "We give thanks to God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, praying always for you." You know, it makes me think, there were a few different times that Paul said that to people. That he was praying always for them. Can you imagine? The Apostle Paul, regarded as one of the greatest Christians ever to live, giving you a statement like that.